Hello, everybody. Hello. Yet again, we have a special conversation series for you today. We have a special guest, someone who has somehow magically found the time in their undoubtedly busy schedule to come and hang out with us today. So we'll talk about that in a second. But before I do that, I will, of course, introduce my partner in crime, the one and only David Hubert. He's going to come in, and we're going to bring in the next guest. Hello, David.
Hey, Brent.
How are you? Fancy seeing you here.
Yeah. How are you this morning?
I'm doing okay. I'm pretty excited. Today's guest, obviously, we've already advertised this, so people probably know who it is. I'm just going to bring him in, and then we're just going to have our, typical kind of conversation like we always do. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. All right.
Rock and roll.
Andrew Gordon, how are you, sir?
Hey guys, hey Brent, hey David, how are you?
How are you?
Very good. How's I'm always impressed by the backgrounds with these fancy cameras, the blur and the whole thing. Do you guys get makeup recording and everything?
Yeah, totally. We get like fed off camera by our army of assistants as well. So yeah.
Anyway, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here for sure. A lot of people are very excited about this because we let people know. So we have some questions. We'll be taking questions towards the end of today's chat, probably the last like 20 to 15 minutes. So I'll try to ring a bell or something to let everybody know that we kind of want to shift our focus over to that. But in the meantime, we can just sort of chat about whatever we want to chat about. I think obviously there's a bazillion things that we could chat about. I mean, considering you're in the room, there's like I have an infinite number of things that I would like to talk about. But I'd like to hear what David wants to roll with first.
Yeah, well, maybe just for the few viewers that might not know about you, maybe just a quick introduction about your background.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've been in animation since. I mean, I kind of like was a nerd about animation, and I got into it probably in 8th grade of high school. My parents had come home with a Radio Shack computer called a Tandy. And I know I'm dating myself, but it came with a package called Deluxe Paint 3. I don't know if any Amiga fans are out there, but like I was like blown away by this piece of animation. It was like a paint program. And so I got into computer graphics that way. Like I was interested in games like Sierra Online games where you pilot a little character around. And so it got me interested in doing computer animation. And then I found that there was nowhere to go for animation back in those days. You couldn't really learn it. There was a place in Brooklyn, New York called Pratt. They were kind of doing something, and there was, little places were just starting to kind of do it. And so back then, all I thought was like, I have to get time on a computer. Like, that's what you have to do. You know, my guidance counselor was like, you got to go to computer you have to go and learn how to program. I was like, really? And so he was wrong, you know. And so I ended up after all this back and forth, went to a school in Vancouver. It's called Van Arts, which is now, you know, back then it was like 3 people or, you know, maybe 10. And this guy from Warner Brothers came up to recruit for a movie called Marvin the Martian and the Third Dimension. And he said, he saw a little test I did, which was like a flour sack assignment. And he was like, how would you like to work at Warner Brothers? And I was like, really? And I had only been there like 6 months, you know? And so even the teachers were like, what? Why are you picking him? You know? They actually had their portfolios in their hands.
Oh, ouch.
And so I had to compete with the teachers too. But eventually, you know, I got hired, and another guy named Mike Venturini got hired, and then a friend of mine, Tom Hyman. We all went down to Warner Brothers. And Mike V still works at Pixar, and Tom, he's in Austin, Texas, working on some great stuff. But, you know, after Warner Brothers, I went to Pixar, and I spent 20 years there from 1997 and left in like end of 2017. And I got my Woody statue, you know, and, you know, for 20 years of work, and I worked on a lot of movies there. And then I went over to Paris for about a year. I worked on a little bit of the Minions 2 movie. And then I was at DNEG for a couple of years in London because I wanted to kind of take a little side trip and work there. And that was amazing, helping them start up their feature animation program or their feature department. And now I'm back home in California, like where I you know, started, and working for Cinesite, and working there as a kind of a global animation director or whatever you call it, and, you know, really helping them get all the kind of animation done there. So it's been fun.
Awesome. You kind of touched a little bit on the very early days of 3D animation, and that's something I'm actually curious about. A little, you know, history lesson part of this discussion here. The first feature you worked on at Pixar was Bug's Life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so being well aware of all the technology that we have today, if you had to bring everyone back in time, those that are starting in the industry now, and describe a little bit how it was to animate in the mid to late 90s, how would you describe the experience?
Well, you know, Warner Brothers was like Softimage. Like they used Softimage, and it was Warner Classics and Wabbit, which was called Warner Digital, right? So they were off the shelf. Leaving there and going to Pixar was like, it was like going to a startup back then. It was so small. It was like 250 people. You know, I was there when Steve Jobs would show up every couple of days, and he would introduce people. We just got someone new in lighting. All right. You know, and everybody would clap. You know. Even animators would walk around and they'd be like, who's that guy? Like, you know, some guy just asked me how I like working here. And they would be like, that's Steve Jobs. Like, they're like, who's he?
Steve who?
Like, he's the guy that works at Apple. You know, and so Steve was just going back to Apple. But animating at Pixar was, back in those days, I recently went to Arizona to visit my folks, and they had a letter that I had written them that after I was there for 3 days. And I basically, what the letter said was, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know. I'm like the worst person here, right? So I was really intimidated because these 22-year-old guys were there and girls, and they were amazing. There was a group of core people at that time that was like, they were like the top animators. I think it was like Doug Sweetland, Mark Oftedal, there was this guy, you know, John Cars, you know, there was like a group of people there, you know, Dave Devan, Steve Hunter, like there's so many different people, Karen Kaiser, and they had known what they did. They just finished Toy Story. So I come in on this movie, they give you this piece of software that's completely different from any software. It comes with a big spreadsheet. It looks like you're kind of animating with numbers, and it's all custom. And I was like, how do you do this? You know, you'd have to record to another screen that when you went to dailies, you'd have to press play and run into dailies while it was playing. So people would look at each other's screens, if you were not in dailies, to see what you were going to show, which was really interesting.
Holy cow.
And you go in there, and then this guy is sitting there. It was on A Bug's Life. It was Andrew Stanton and John Lasseter in the middle of this dailies room with this crappy couches, and everybody is watching it on the screen, and they're looping these shots. And, it was amazing because you got to see, like how people worked. You never were going to final something until it was really done. There was no polished reviews or anything like that. But it was incredible to kind of watch it grow up. And also the department itself was kind of formulating. And it was wild. It was like a Animal House. It was like, people were putting trains, and they'd decorate their offices, and there were food fights, and there were people playing jokes on each other. So it felt like an animation studio, which was really exciting at that time. But it was hard, and it was competitive, and very. I was stressed out a lot.
One of the things I remember the most when we were looking at those very early days production. Behind the scene video is exactly what you describe. All animators or all artists that would actually dress their own little office or little desk with all those decoration and really kind of take ownership of the space. I'm interested to know where this is coming from, and then leading it to a conversation. Creativity Inc. is definitely one of the most eye-opening book for me, and it kind of describe a little bit the culture that was built at Pixar. And I feel that those early initiatives to let people own their space with their own creativity must have been part of this culture that they were trying to build, right?
Well, I mean, I had just left a company that was the opposite of that. While Warner Brothers was really good and incredibly talented people, it was very corporate. It was like I worked in a bank building. Like, I went to school, I went to work through the mall and to get to a bank. So but Pixar was like a startup. And so where that culture came from, I think it really came from Cal Arts, which is that Cal Arts, a lot of these directors came from Cal Arts, and Cal Arts was like, like there was graffiti on the walls and people were sleeping under their desks. And so a lot of the directors, they came from there, and they kind of infused this culture of like, do whatever you want, they didn't care. So that culture of being protected by management to do whatever you wanted, I think the animators pushed on that a little bit, and people kind of, once somebody did something, and like, let's say, I remember an animator named Tasha Wadeen, she put a bunk bed in her cubicle. Like she put her in a bed, and then everybody was like, how can I up that? And so then Mark Walsh built a tiki room, and then another guy built a pagoda out of cardboard, and then so it started to become like a ghetto of all these little crappy looking mishmashes of offices. And I think that by the time we were ready to move out of there, there was this place at Pixar. It was called the Pit, which was, it really was like, it looked like a pit because it was just like just a mishmash of offices, and people were encouraged to do whatever they want. And then I think that culture spread to everybody else, where like people would say, well, why does animation get to do it? Like, why can't we do that? And there's really no reason, right? So when they moved into the new building, I think around 2000, like everybody was afraid that it would kind of be like, oh, it's going to be super clean and corporate. And so immediately people started to mess with it a little bit, I remember we bought some fake grass, and I bought some lamps, and I ended up finding a secret room in my office when I first moved in. It was like a hatch, and then that's a whole nother story. But we were just trying to push on things, and then it's mostly middle management that will be like, you can't do that. That's illegal, and you've got fire codes. And then, but if you get the protection of the higher ups, namely Steve or John, at that time it was John, then they couldn't really touch you, and I think that's what happened, was that there was a protection of doing that and being able to kind of push back on the culture.
So that's probably what led eventually to allowing this secret room that you found out, because I'm assuming that I don't know if most animation studio, but definitely in most business, this would not be allowed. And as you said, well, there's fire hazard, there's this, there's that, so please. But it turned to be the exact opposite. It's this thing that became iconic that everyone wanted to kind of visit and be a little bit a part of.
Well, it was definitely a fire hazard. I will say that the Love Lounge, which is what it originally was called, it was basically like an air-conditioned vent that you had to access the air conditioning from. So I went in there and I was like all dusty and it was terrible, right? And I put some fur in there and I started putting Christmas lights, and then I invited, just the people, like the 3 animators around my office into it. I think it was like Dylan Brown, Doug Dooley, and maybe Warren Trezevant. And I was like, guys, come on in here and we're going to have a drink. And I shook up a cocktail, and then we were like, this is cool. Like, it sounded like the air conditioning was on, and then after, like, literally it started to become like it was a secret room for real for about a month. But then during a walkthrough, Andrew Stanton, he was like, where is Andrew? Like, he was looking for me for walkthrough, and we were all in there. So we came out, and he was like, what the hell? And when he poked his head into the room,
Busted.
he was really tall, so he was like, what the heck? And he couldn't believe it, right? And so he told everybody, and of course then Steve Jobs and John came by, and then it was like game over. Then it was like no more secret room, but then those guys wanted to share it with everybody. So I'm like getting visits from
That's so funny.
Robert De Niro one day.
That's part of the corporate visit.
Like I've got, Steve is asking me to come in with I'm like, Steve, it's your company. You can come in anytime you want. Like I used to sit in there in my office. I would be animating, right? And there's like let's say that there's like a hatch, like right here, right? There's like a little. And so I would be having to animate. And like, Andrew, I'm going to just take somebody in there. This is like Steve. I'm like, okay, and so he goes in there, they crawl in, and then I would listen to sometimes their conversations, like I could hear what they were saying. And man, all I could say is, if I had only used some of that information,
no kidding,
I would have been rich.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was really cool. And then ultimately the animation department moved out of that area of Pixar. Back in those days, it was a little bit, I think Layout moved in, or no, I forget who moved in, and they said, we're going to move the whole department, but we do have another office, which had, again, some sort of a annexed room, which was used for, I think, the sound system at Pixar. Like the whole rack was in there. And so we changed that out. And then I was able to say, all right, can I build something? They're like, yeah, do whatever you want. Because I was like, really? Because they had auctioned this thing off for like $10,000 to have a drink, with somebody in the Love Lounge for charity, right? And so I ended up making one with like a bookshelf and a casino, and then that was another like great experience. So yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. What do you think that this little room represented for Pixar, for Steve, and because it definitely became part of the experience, part of one of the things that look how we are different, how we're creative, and all that. Do you think that it kind of had this little okay, I can describe it, that it kind of represented something that was at the core of what Pixar was?
Because where I'm coming from, like I'm being an animator around the same time as well. I remember hearing these stories, and it was almost like from my perspective, it was like a calling card almost. It was like a calling card for other creative people. It said something without having said very much at all. Like I'm just like, I'd love to know your perspective. Like, did you realize that was happening? Did it became like that it became like this almost this secret handshake to other animators that wanted to be like to be working in a bubble with people that were like literally had this boundless freedom?
Well, I think that the part of the secret sauce of that era of Pixar and studios that go down that road is that I think at the top level is that there is a freedom to do things, and you're not going to get smacked on the wrist for doing it. And I think that that kind of experience was there, with those things. And I think, a lot of things that happened back in those early days of like parties and the camaraderie of the animation department. But I think that, for me personally, I wasn't going out and trying to be like, we're going to be a pirate ship, like it was more of like, I just wanted to do something that was fun.
Yeah.
Because I had always read stories when I was younger about like Termite Terrace and these legendary parties that happened, like the Norconian party at Disney, the Snow White party, and so I think we kind of wanted to recreate that in some way of like this sense of, a little bit like we're working on animated movies, but we're going to have as much fun as possible.
Yeah.
Because I think that what I was always told is that if we have a lot of fun, it'll end up back on the screen. And that kind of irreverence. And, back in those days, you have to also realize that Pixar wanted to make movies that Disney didn't necessarily want to make, like in terms of like, they didn't want to make a princess movie at the time. They didn't want to make a movie with songs. They wanted to just make movies that they liked growing up with. Like, a lot of the filmmakers, they just wanted to make films that they were into. And so, but the secret rooms and all that stuff, that was like definitely a culture of like, let's see what we can get away with or push, but also, not with going over the line. Like there's always a line you don't want to cross at a company. And I think that's hard to know, like you have to kind of realize that. And I think that obviously happens, where you go too far and it's like, look, this is still a workplace,
Yeah.
But I agree that from the exterior, it kind of gave the impression that it was a place, I don't want to say run by artists, but that artists had a lot of freedom. And in parallel, it was by far the most successful studio, both on the critic side and the box office style. So I think that for an entire generation, it was like, see, they're having fun. They are allowed to be crazy, and they're still making billions. So why can't we have a little bit more of that ourselves?
Yeah,
I agree with you, and I think that a lot of companies forget about that.
They do.
And I think that if you do give artists, a lot of freedom and the kind of space to explore and to do their own thing and to make shorts on the side. And, I think that it does feed back into the ultimate culture. Like, and I think that DNA is probably still there. I think it's a lot different now. There's a lot more corporate, like, I guess, constraints that, for things that, can't be done the same way. But I think the DNA of what you're talking about is that it's artist run and it's excellence of what you love about the craft, that animation is like, really king, and I think that, at some studios, it's not that way. It's like the voice talent is the king, or the, maybe the effects are the star. But I think that Pixar at that time, at least during my tenure there, it was all about story and character, and really pushing on like, this isn't good enough. Let's keep going and iterating and trust the process and all these things that you read about in the books. I had a mentorship with Ed Catmull actually that, was really enlightening, like where he kind of broke down that book, and it was amazing just to hear him talk and expound around the ideas of listening and really, really digging into what didn't work and what did work, about things. Yeah.
Yeah. There's one thing in his book, Creativity Inc., that really struck me, and was the when they put in place the brain trust which is basically you surround, the directors or whoever has a creative challenge, and you kind of remove the hierarchy of who's supervising who, and it's just a trusted group of people that you can bounce idea around and try to find solution. Is that something that you were exposed to when you were working over there, or is that something that you have thoughts on?
I got to go to a couple of brain trusts, but I think mostly the brain trust was a very small group of people that was mostly surrounded by, like the writer and the director, obviously producer, story people would come in from the story department. You would have people that would come in that were the writer. And so it was usually a smaller group, but I did kind of see a couple of sessions, obviously. And I always thought it was amazing because what the book says might not always be perfectly true. I think there's always like a little bit of mythology that happens when you read a book or a magazine article. I think what happens is that, the magazine article guy, or girl, they'll interview somebody and then they'll write an article, and then that'll become the mythology of how the movie was made. But really it isn't that way. I think that the Brain Trust was just great in that it was just experts that were pushing back. And I think that it was always told to me that that's not how Hollywood worked. Hollywood, if you had like a director, for instance, I think I talked to Quentin Tarantino about this when he visited the Love Lounge, oddly. He said that he didn't like to have director screenings that much because he knew he was going to get notes, and he didn't like getting notes. He wanted to make the movie he wanted to make.
Yeah.
But I think that Pixar was very different in that they were giving notes to the director, and if they didn't take them, it was really up to them, like whether they took the notes or the spirit of the note. What is really trying to be said. And I think that ultimately they're making their movie, but they're getting input from all these people to kind of try to address things that they see that are not working, like the character's not likable, or this character there's this whole area of the movie is talking too much. This just nothing. So I think that if the director didn't address the notes and it went back and forth and it wasn't improving, obviously, like most movies, there's something big happens, a crisis.
Yeah.
And I think, half of all the movies I worked on, I think there was a director change, or there was always some crisis that everybody knew that was going to happen. Like, okay, something's going to happen. They're going to blow the movie up. You almost feel it.
Yeah.
Keeps everyone on their toes, I guess. That's for
sure.
sure.
It's almost reassuring to know that a studio like Pixar is getting more often than not in trouble on those production, and they have to either hit the brake, or, as you said, change director, or change sequences and all that. We kind of have, again, this idea from the exterior that they just arrive with the perfect idea and then they perfectly execute it, and it's a walk in the park.
No way. I don't think any studio has it that way. If they are, then it'd be amazing. But I think every studio, there's some crisis, there's some problem, there's some thing that happens that that there's going to be a huge blow up. I think there was maybe a couple movies where I don't remember it happening as bad. Maybe Incredibles for me wasn't like, I don't remember a huge explosion, but there if you ask them, they'll be like, oh yeah, there was a huge thing here. But I think I think it's almost like part of the process, like knowing that even on a shot work, like on animator shot work, I would always, when I was animating a shot, I always felt like there was a time in the shot where I was like, I hate this. Like, this looks like crap. I don't know what I'm doing. And even my, people looking at it would be like, like they would make notes. And so, and if I didn't blow it up, I knew that the shot would suck, and I think that it was almost like a natural pain or process. And I found, looking at some of the better animators, the top animators' work, that some of them would go through extreme pain and like literally like shouting and cursing and sleeping there, but then they would come out with this piece of work that was stunning, that I'd be like, oh my God, like how did they do that? but it was through pain. Like it was through like utter pain to get it like that.
And in those situations, do you feel that they just kept on iterating, or there's a few times that they're like, you know what, start over. It doesn't work. I'm going in the wrong direction. I'd rather start over on a blank page and redo it.
No, I think that there are always going to be animators that are like, knock it out of the park, and you're like, like I can't believe that person is so good, But I think that for the ones that have really unbelievable acting, or there's a moment in a scene that you just remember, I do think that there was iterations and going around and around and pushing further on it. Unless somebody just gets a character or a scene and they just have it in their head, which happens. I do think a lot of the greatest scenes in animation, like they've been pounded, Yeah.
I'm just curious, what was your favorite part in animation in the entire process?
My favorite part, I think showing blocking in dailies for the first time. Your heart is beating. You don't know whether you're going to get a laugh maybe, or somebody's going to talk about your shot after dailies. I think that was always exciting, especially in the early days where, you're comparing yourself to people that are really, really good, and kind of getting that kind of feeling like, yeah, I can do this, Like I thought maybe I would last at Pixar for like a year or maybe
20 years later.
But I think that it was that competitive nature of going into dailies and feeling like I want to show, like I'm a performer, and I think that was the most. I liked that part. I also liked the cultural aspect of the friendships and the, I don't want to say cultish nature, but I think that there was a little bit of like a little kind of insular. It's very different from outside. Now being outside of the studio, it's just different out there. It's great in some ways. It's other ways it's not. I think there's pluses and minuses, but I don't know. The process for me, I just like blocking. Polish to me was always like that was like. I almost feel like now a lot of animation is over polished, and I feel like people polish out all the kind of essence of it, and you're like looking at such perfection of spline work, and you're like, where did the core go?
Yeah, it's funny because for me, I definitely enjoy the blocking process as well, and I definitely felt this kind of stress and anxiety when you show in front of not only the director but the producer and 20 animators and everyone around. But at the same time, it was the most difficult part of animation, but the most rewarding as well when it's working well. As polishing, that's the moment that I went on autopilot. Let's say your blocking is approved, you're already in spline, you're polishing. I would have like music and a documentary on the style and just occupy my brain because it became almost like autopilot boring. So I need, more stimulus. Otherwise, it's just going to be a few days of just boredom.
I always felt like one of the tools that was extremely more advanced than Maya was the spline editor at Pixar, which was this very, very, without kind of giving away like the tool, which you really can't, but I think it allowed you to kind of have tabbed splines. Like you could have a bunch of tabs of like many different splines, and the scale between those splines and the relationships, like hands and feet and then torso and head. And so I always found that was really powerful. And I'd always wondered, like, why doesn't Maya have that? Like little things like that,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the legendary things too that I've always heard about Pixar and other big companies like it, like DreamWorks, and like it feels like animators almost have to relearn their craft in many ways because of all the proprietary tools and like these closely guarded secrets that I hear a lot of animators that leave these studios and then they just almost feel like, oh my God, I have to do it the old-fashioned way now. Like they almost get used to those tools, and then they realize how painful it's going to be to have to operate without them. So like, There must be just a gigantic learning curve, I would imagine, for a lot of animators who haven't been exposed to those tools, and just to kind of relearn a new way of doing things.
You mean going from proprietary to off the shelf?
No, like say for instance, you're an animator, you've been working in Maya all that for years, and then you get a job at Pixar, and then suddenly it's like, wow, it's like they don't use Maya here, they use something completely different. Like, is that,
I think
you see a lot of
not
animators?
that hard.
Sorry, not that hard.
I think it's the other way around is harder. I think that
yeah, sure.
often the Maya animators would come in and be like, "This tool sucks," but then they'd be like, "Wow, this tool is ridiculously amazing,"
Yeah.
And I think that they learn that it's way more powerful in the end. And then when you leave that, you're like, I gotta do this.
Totally.
So I think that that's really, and it kind of excites me about companies like Blender that are kind of more open source, where you're starting to see like all these add-ons and plugins, and you're like, that's what I like. And I always thought that DreamWorks or Pixar or Disney or whoever would just open source their software. Like,
wouldn't that be nice?
What's the
well? At least Pixar, like at least they released RenderMan. Like, I mean, that changed the industry for a lot of other companies, because it's such a great rendering engine that it changed everything for some people. But yeah, I agree. It would be so nice to be able to get access to some of those tools. And it's interesting because you were there for like in the second movie, right? Like, so you would have seen so much pioneering in the technology, like so much of it. Like, I can only imagine what you would have witnessed from beginning until the time you left, just because of so many years of innovation. And I can only imagine how those tools improved from the beginning to the end.
Well, it was weird because, when I first got there, in order to just to check out a shot, it was all Linux and Unix based. You'd have to check it out. And then if you wanted to check out Flick, but then someone else, you didn't want Heimlich, you'd have to type in, who you wanted to check out, but you still could share a shot in the very, very beginning even. And I think that that's stuff that I don't even see, as well as today, even like in current, pipelines. Like, there's not easy shot sharing. There's not multi-shots where you've got, like, think about if Maya could have 5 to 10 shots open, a whole sequence where you can work on everything. That's something that doesn't exist. That's been in a lot of these companies, is just multi-shot workflow, hookups and being able to play this shot live in this section, and then I'm animating on this one, and I'm looking at I can work on the hookup, like that stuff is super powerful. Also things like, if I've got a ridiculously complex background and I just want a Z-depth image of it, like an image that describes the depth, like that stuff is still not really existing out there in the world. So I think that there's a lot of technology that exists that is very obvious, but I think that it just takes somebody writing it and somebody kind of understanding it. I think having USD out there, that is great. I think that's really improved. But I think that a lot of it is customizing that. It's interesting.
I feel like a lot of studios I've worked at, that's sort of a common problem that the content creators suffer, is to try to convince the production team to spend production money on some of the tooling to make the quality of life of some of the artists better. It's not to say that they don't want to. It's just that it's difficult during production to sort of justify taking like these engineers that are like putting out fires on the production to like go and try to be preventative, go visit some of the the virtual houses before fires strike and make those tools. I feel like it's a common complaint, and I feel like some of the more successful companies have somehow prioritized that. They've said, look, we need to build very, very, very comfortable, very ergonomic, very powerful pencils for our artists, because otherwise, like, what else are we doing here? Like, I just find that there's a correlation between investing in those kind of things and the results often.
Well, I think that was probably part of the Pixar, legacy, was that it really was a computer software company, back before it became film. So there were already people doing that, and writing tools and then inventing things like alpha channels and stuff like that. So I think that was kind of in the history of that's probably what was missing at some of the other studios. I think that the importance of that, you're right. It does get lost, and people will be like, "Well, you guys aren't on this production. It's not ramping up. We don't need to make that tool yet."
Yeah,
But
totally.
yes, we do.
Yeah,
Please.
actually, yeah. Please, God, please make that tool right away. Yeah.
So that's why I think that all the stuff that's happening with Unreal Engine and all these tools that are coming up that can read, your face and you're able to kind of, all that stuff is very close to kind of changing the paradigm, like the ability to kind of block with my hand if I wanted to, or use this as like my translation. If I want to just take a rock and then go boom, 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 like obviously the camera should know where it is, and I can block, like blocking, animating in VR, all that stuff. I still feel like there's a way more to go, and there's so many more things that can be done, and it'll be 10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, you animated like that? Yeah.
For sure. It's like looking at, my daughter looks at a telephone, like it was a video she saw on the internet the other day, and it was like one of the old school ones, right? She laughs her ass off at the end, and she looks at me, she goes, "That wasn't even a real telephone." And I'm like, "Oh man."
It's amazing.
Not even a real telephone.
But that's a question
we get mixed up though. Like, do you guys ever how do you guys keep up on every single technology? And I was kind of curious about how the audience, like, how do you know you're not missing out on, like, this whole thing with, like, let's say NFTs, it comes up, I hear it about it like a month ago. Now it's like, boom, mainstream.
Explodes.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It goes so fast, and it seems that every year it seems to be going faster and faster. We have, some people in the community that are asking us, how is, AI is going to influence animation, and in 10 years from now, are we still even going to animate, or we're just going to ask, Alexa, please have this character walk, and then Maya will automatically provide you with an infinite. At the same time, we go back, and I remember like 15, 20 years ago, people will say, "Oh my God, mocap is going to make animators obsolete," and it definitely didn't happen. So is it just history repeating, or is it just that we're getting in this exponential curve that things are going to evolve so rapidly? Because between the AI and NFT and open source software that are coming in, and it's I don't know. I feel there's one constant, is that technology is evolving more rapidly than human. Because even if there's technology right now we could use that could potentially speed up the work like 10x, it's going to take a few years before we are actually able to figure it out, organize ourselves, and create proper pipeline and workflow that take advantage of it. But I do agree that right now, if you try to remain aware on a daily basis of every evolution of the technology in our field, it gets to a point that it's just overwhelming, and you don't even know where to look anymore.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Good way to melt your
By the way,
brain.
did you guys want to take any questions? I see a bunch of questions on the side.
Yeah, absolutely. Now's a good time. It's about 15 minutes to the end of to our little chat here. So I wanted to, let's see here. I have a question here from Ayush, and the question was, what real advice would you have for a junior animator applying for his first job? Real meaning not like genuine. Yeah, exactly.
Not like real advice.
Yeah,
okay.
like what? I don't want the crappy sort of pretend advice. I want the real stuff, the real McCoy.
Well, it's changed so much, over the years. I think that the biggest advice I would give is that the word specificity is really important. It's very easy to make animation that looks like you went to school and you took an assignment and you did this or that. But if you add a little bit of character to that, or storytelling, or specificity of how a character does something, that's what the people those are the people I'm looking for. Is that I'm looking for a spark. Like, I don't necessarily care if your polish isn't absolutely perfect. I'm more interested in the idea of, like, how did this person come up with that idea, and are the acting ideas good? Obviously, the weight and all that principle stuff should be like the jam on the toast, but it's more like, is the toast itself good, and I think that I want to see I want to see character. I want to see somebody that I could be like, that's just like my cousin, and I think that's what I'm interested in, in is ideas and storytelling. You should have all that other stuff there, principles, weight, squash and stretch, all that stuff. But ultimately, acting, like really good acting, and if possible, storytelling. And then you should know that, damn it, like put some freaking backgrounds on there. Like if you can get somebody to hook up clothing, somebody can do some hair for you, light it, even better, because then you're like, whoo, damn, did you see that? Like, we used to look at black and white, renders. We would tell our students back in the days of Academy of Art, and we'd say, don't do any lighting or just animate it. But now I feel like you kind of have to do something that looks good. Otherwise, you're kind of getting left behind with somebody that that has things rendered.
Yeah. So in other words, you don't want to be impressed. You want to be entertained by what you're going to see in the showreel. And I do agree that if you have a dozen great showreel with great performance, who went the extra mile of, as you said, doing the background, the lighting, and all that, and it might inform a little bit on the passion of this individual. So
yeah, I mean, some people would get internships at Pixar. I led the internship there like 4 times, and sometimes people would get in on something they did with socks. Like they animated clothing with magnets, and they'd be like, wow, that looks amazing, and so we would take that person over somebody who had perfect polish, that had the perfect line, So I think that you want to show your creativity, and you want to show your ideas, and you want to, it doesn't always have to be a 2-person dialogue test or this. There should be a weight test on, like make a story, make all that kind of stuff up, and also show people that you have great ideas. I think that's really important. And then also trajectory. Somebody asked, like, what's good advice on this? I think like what is to give an animator starting the journey. I'd say that one of the things I just want to say that I never knew until like way too late was understand what your trajectory is, at least of what you want it to be. Do you want to be an animator? And then do you want to ultimately be a supervising animator? And then do you want to be a director by then? Like I never thought about that. I just went day to day. And I think that it hurt me in the end because I wasn't prepared when I got to that part where I was going to be directing. You got to know so much in order to direct a movie. You have to know film knowledge. You have to know how to cut. You have to know story. You have to know writing. You have to know lighting. And so I think that, like, if you're going to that point, you better start studying while you're working on the animation part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it's funny that just to react really quickly to that the comment you made about it's sort of the game has changed a little bit. Like the bar has been raised beyond just being able to just worrying only about the animation. It's like whether we like it or not, to stand out. There's so many more people now learning how to animate. And there's so many more reels coming to these companies. You need to find a way of figuring out how can you be a unique individual that people are going to remember. Of course, you need to kind of make sure that you've got the right stuff too. Like, I mean, if you like a lot of people, I feel like they rush off and they try to I'm guilty of the same thing, saying the same thing to my students sometimes. Like, don't go too far with this. Make sure that at least your animation, like your body mechanics, need to be good before you start to try to put all the bells and whistles and stuff like this. Because I feel like some animators are in a big rush, so it's like a difficult thing for them to manage in their head. Like, okay, what should I focus on? Should it be the mechanics and then this stuff, or like both of those things? It's kind of it can be a tricky thing, right? But I always tell people, make sure that you absolutely feel like your body mechanics are pretty solid before you try to get too fancy. Otherwise, it looks like you're decorating and distracting from the actual missing sort of foundational walls. I have another question here. Veronica asks, how does it feel to have some of the shots you've animated transcend beyond the actual film and actually enter the space of meme? like where people have like turned your thing into like pulp fiction. Like what does that feel like? I'm sure that's a very different feeling than seeing your stuff on the screen for the first time.
I mean, I never really thought about that. That's a great question. I mean, like you're talking about like a meme, if you type in like Edna Mode or Mike Wazowski or something like that. Is that what you're talking?
And like they're just like a meme, like it's either just like a single shot with like some text or maybe just a quick short video or something that is just viral. In other words, it's that
I mean, honestly, like people are like, animators are kind of like about as famous as, radio hosts, like they're kind of like, invisible in some ways because it isn't you that you're doing the work. It's like the character comes out. So I think that, I mean, I'll relate a funny story. I remember Glenn Keane telling this story about how he was trying to get into Disneyland, and he couldn't get in for some reason. And he was like, don't you know who I am? Like essentially he was like, I animated Beast, and I'm Glenn Keane. And they were like, so they didn't really know. And so I think I kind of equated to that. And like I don't really think about any of that. It's just more luck, if anything. If something goes out there and it's viral or people like it, I think that's really it's cool to see, but I never really thought about it. And my kids, they certainly don't care. So I think I just look at it like, I mean, I ultimately, it would be cool to work on stuff that people see. But I never really thought about the whole meme thing.
Yeah, I feel like the meme thing it's interesting because it feels like it left the screen. It became bigger. It integrated itself into daily life, like where like that you've done something interesting when you like your uncle that you haven't seen in years sends you an email with a meme that like was attached to a shot that you did on a film. Like it goes
or like
beyond.
A pose you did ends up on a diaper.
Yeah,
you're like, I did that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I had a part of the design. I was Pampers brought me in. I took as a consultant on that one. Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of people stay at companies like these big companies, because it's not so much about the money it's about like they get to work on these films that a lot of people see. And, and I think that's part of the attraction of it, and I think I get that.
Yeah, makes sense. I got another question here from Chester. Thoughts on creating a more collaborative animation what animation at a culture? Oh, wait, hold on a second. I should have maybe not read that one because I can't quite read that one. Chester has worked in some studios that have great collaboration and basically and feedback, and others with basically none. I guess the general idea here is any tips in your mind on how you can stimulate and cultivate this kind of collaborative animation culture that you'll be looking for really good productions.
Well, I mean, it's hard when you're in this pandemic because everybody's on Zoom and it's extremely difficult to do it over digital. You can't have like, meetings where you're like, all right, everybody get their drink out. We're going to make a cocktail. It's like, that's fun. But I think that learning is one thing. Like inspiration is huge. Being able to never, ever be like you've arrived, like constantly digging in and analyzing yourself and the team and constantly learning. I think when I started over at DNEG, we were trying to build that. We were doing things called Animators Talking Animation. People would come in with a lecture every week. We would invite people. I'm trying to do the same thing with Cinesite where I'm inviting a lot of people from outside and inside. And I think that's one of the great things about a studio that shares, and you're sharing how you did it, and animators are sharing within themselves, and the lighting team is coming to see, and it's basically just integrating everybody and trying to say like, how do we make this better, and what do we like about this, and what if this, and that's where you start to kind of come up with all these like, well, what if we had a tool that could do this, and it's like, yeah, we could do that. And then this other person will go and do it on the side, and it's really that kind of can-do attitude, and not having people that are the blockers that are like, well, we can't do that because the XYZ budget's good. It's like, just get out of here. Like you want the people that are like, damn right, we're going to do that. And this is how we're going to do that. Like, and that's how stuff really kind of starts to light on fire. But I would say that it's inspiration. It's also keeping it fun and loose. And remember that we are making cartoons at the end of the day. We're not in a bank, you know,
or saving lives in a hospital.
Yeah, I mean, maybe saving lives with laughs, you know, but
that's true.
Yeah, but I do think that, like, I think it's just like not being so precious about things and being like, let's have fun, let's do this, like let's make it the way we would want it, you know.
Yeah. I have another one here. this one's directed at us. I'll put it up there anyways, just for funsies. So where the heck are all the modeling conversations? That's what one person wants to know in the chat.
Modeling. I mean, I have such a huge respect for, like, the modeling is like probably one of the most important things. Like out of the box, your character or your set or your background is like, I mean, that's what it's all about, you know. And if you don't start with something, like I've had such great time working with modelers, and it's just one of the most important things is working with great modelers and riggers and just in general. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's for you guys to get more modelers.
Yeah, no, it was a jab at David and I, because we keep bringing on these amazing guests that have like this animation experience, and now naturally people are like, they're peripheral to that, or kind of like, okay, so like, when do we get our money guest that we get to ask them all kind of modeler questions? So yeah, that's what that was all about.
So Brent, I would say during next week stream, we're going to announce who's going to be our first modeler guest for the next stream. So we have 1 week to figure this one out.
Oh boy, all right.
Well, I can't wait.
So Andrew, I have a question. I'm selfishly taking a jump into the queue here.
Sure.
So we didn't get a chance to touch on this, but like I find it you're a unique person that, you know, very few people can probably answer a question like this. So I think this is a good one. A lot of people struggle, right, when they're at a job and they like that job, but they have there's something they feel like they need to go do. I feel like you probably just went through a journey like this. And I mean, I can imagine the all the ideas, like, I'm sure that was scary and exciting, but like to leave a job like Pixar after 20 years, like, you don't have to get too deep into this. I mean, because it is a pretty big question.
Why'd you leave? Right?
I'm not trying to give you a gotcha question here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, like, animators, it's hard, right? Because we wear our hearts on our sleeves. We put a lot of our effort into things, and sometimes we feel the need, like we almost feel like we're crazy because we love this job. I've left a lot of jobs that I've loved, I guess is what I'm getting into here. And I think there's a lot of new animators that are kind of new to the job that don't know how to manage a situation like that. Like, how do they feel like they're going to be blacklisted if they leave a job like that, and like they get all these fears and these assumptions that come with that. I mean, I guess maybe just a little insight into like maybe the kind of the mental and emotional journey that you kind of were on when coming up with making a decision like this.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. First of all, I mean, I think that ultimately, you know, some people would say up or out, right? And I think that if you love animating and just that's all you want to do, then you would never leave a job that like a Pixar or a Disney, because you're an animator and that's all you want to do. I think I was trying to scratch an itch that after 15, 20 years there, I was like, what else can I do to kind of stay excited and motivated? Because animation was definitely there, but I just felt like I wasn't learning as much as I could. You know, maybe I could learn and be a little bit better of an animator, or just animate characters, be an actor, essentially, you know.
Yep.
And I do miss that. I definitely do. But I just kind of wanted to see if there was something outside of Pixar, and also what was it like outside the United States was something. I wanted to take my family on a journey, like a character, right?
For sure.
But I ultimately, the problem with places like Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks and all these high-end studios is that there's an incredibly huge amount of talent that is hitting like a ceiling of like, look, we've got this whole runway of people that are doing things, and some are young and some are have incredible ideas. You have to let those people flourish and bring up the new ideas, you know. And so I think that I just was kind of wanting to flex different types of muscles of like, wonder what it would be like to exec produce, or what it would be like to help on a short or make a short, or or what would it be like to kind of get the experience of running things a little bit better? And I think that's when that's when I really felt like I wanted to just try what it was like outside a little bit. And I would say that it's been both amazing and also really hard.
I can only imagine.
You leave the womb to go out into the dark cold, and you're like,
totally.
But I think that I've learned like 10 times as much. And I think that Ed Catmull, he's like, take risks, like he encouraged me to like, you have to take risks. I literally asked him, I said, I don't know if I should leave or not. I'm conflicted about it. He goes, well, it's good to take risks.
What a great mentor.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Awesome. I'm happy to go a little later if you guys want to have a couple more questions. I don't have to end it right on. Exactly.
Are you sure? Okay, yeah. I can ask a couple more. There's a couple more. There's one I had queued up. Thanks, by the way, for sticking around for a couple extra minutes. That's amazing. We have a question here, which is kind of perfectly piggybacking on this theme that we're on right now, which is, what is it like being an animation director? Like, you've made that transition. You had this itch you wanted to scratch. You wanted to feel like the entrepreneur or the pioneer, and you wanted to go and take a look at this other area of the industry and this other experience. What has that been like so far in your mind? And like, how is it different? Like, do you like it more? Do you like it less? Is it the same, just different? Like, what does that feel like, I guess, in relationship to what your previous job was like?
I think that when you're an animator, you're definitely like, you're left to your own devices, and you can focus on that shot or shots, and you're very, very focused. And then you have a piece of something to show, and you're like, I did that shot, And so with animation direction, you're kind of like, you're helping everybody, and you're helping try to get the collective, work up. And it's not sometimes as rewarding as like the literal shot. It's more like being a coach on like the sidelines, like, and watching these incredible athletes. You're like, damn, like I could never run that fast. But if you do this way and maybe try this, you're going to be able to do this better. Totally. And I think that's really rewarding. I would say that you definitely do lose a little bit of your muscle of animation. Like, when you're not animating shots and you're not on the ground, and you lose it, so I think it's important for animation directors to stay warm. I think, otherwise you're really losing a little bit of it. I was always impressed that even Pete Docter would animate like one shot on the film or something, but I do think that it's more rewarding, like that you can craft a larger thing. I think that's really cool. If you're interested in teaching, then you're naturally probably interested in directing, because you're kind of helping mentor people towards a larger goal. And I think that's been really rewarding for me, seeing people succeed. What I don't understand sometimes is like the emotional problems that people have, or the human resource problems of like, well, this person is not going to get their shot done because of XYZ. And it's like, okay, and you have to be really like a good listener. And I've had to learn a lot about that, and what not to say, and how to be an adult, kind of, because when you're an animator, you're kind of like a kid a little bit,
building forts in your office.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective, and I loved hearing you articulate it like that. Like the idea of it being that you are transitioning from being maybe a star player to being a coach. And I mean, it's a great analogy, because a lot of star players from sports have done exactly the same thing, and not all of them are able to do that transition. I feel like some of them, they feel like at the end of the day, no, they really feel like they would need to be the one out there scoring the goal. They cannot, for some reason, they struggle with it, feeling like it's just as much their goal as it is the player's goal, because they had a part in that. And I think if you're not built like this, it's amazing that you obviously sound like you're built like this. So you're probably warming up quite nicely to that directorial role. But a lot of people, like, they don't transition well. I know of a lot of people who try directing, and it just doesn't sit right.
Totally. I mean, I would totally agree. I think that it's really hard. And what I like about it, like, and I feel like, especially if you're with somebody that was a director, if you get the chance to co-direct, you watch them and you're like, wow, that's how it's done, and I think that I like the learning process. I feel like that's where you want to be. You always want to be in a constant state of growth and learning.
Totally. Otherwise you get stagnant.
That's why I ultimately left, was because I just felt like, okay, I could go on to the next feature and the next and the next, and maybe do, but there were kind of ironically, now there's like Disney Plus. They probably opened up a whole bunch of things, but you know,
now that Ed was gone, let's open that thing up. Let's go.
No, you make
Perfect
choices,
timing.
and I think that I've been having a lot of fun work. I have a couple of really fun projects that I've been working on. I can't necessarily talk about them yet, but they're just totally different things that I would have never gotten to work on.
Oh, that's
like,
exciting.
Sort of like an R-rated cartoon.
Oh.
That's been kind of interesting, and working on like things in other countries. So it's been fun.
That's cool.
I'm just curious, Andrew, any ambition eventually of maybe directing your own, short or feature, or kind of go in this other, because that's another direction.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if it's the next step, but it's definitely one of the.
Yeah.
Well, I always loved the idea of just storytelling, and if the right story comes around, I definitely have a couple of things in development that I'm working on, and I think that if the planets align and it's something exciting, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And, it is going to wrap it up. And it's kind of a classic question, so a little cliche, but what better way to end a beautiful conversation with a little bow on it, a little cliche bow. So the question is, it's a bit of a paraphrase from one of the questions from the chat, but basically, if you could go back in time and somehow have that conversation with the young, ambitious and excited animator coming out of you went to Van.
CalArts.
Oh, that's right. You went to CalArts, right? But then you.
No, I didn't go to CalArts. I went to a little school in Vancouver and
exactly.
a school in New Jersey called William Patterson. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It was called Van? Is that the same school that turned into Vancouver Film School, or are they completely different entities?
It was in the very early days. It was called Vancouver School of Animation. Then it turned into a school called Van Arts.
Okay. Yes. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So Van Art, but it's still around, is it not? Van Art?
Yeah, it's still around.
Okay. Right. Okay. Good. So if you could go back and talk to that person, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, what would you tell them about, what was like to prepare them for the journey that you were about to go on?
That's a great question. I probably would have stayed in school a little longer. I feel like
don't leave the place.
No,
Safety.
I would have stayed. I would have made films. I would have made a couple of films in school. One of the things I regret was not. I got hired after about 2.5 years of schooling, and so I regret not staying in and maybe making a film or learning about something different. I took the job because I had no money, and so I would just say I would want to work on a film. That was one of the things that I'd be like, all right, and I think that's what you get when you see some of these filmmakers from some of the schools. I've been impressed with a lot of the schools in France, that have these 5-year programs where they have a group of 5 people making an unbelievable film, I think I would have liked to do that, so yeah, I think just making a film. And I also would have said to my younger self, don't freak out as much, just chill out a little bit, try to relax. It's good to have worries, but I think don't, just try to take it one day at a time. I used to, people would go up to Tahoe and go skiing, and I'd be like, I can't, I have to animate the shot.
Yeah.
I probably would have told them, go up to Tahoe.
Exactly. You should probably take that trip to Tahoe.
Yeah.
Friendly advice. Okay, well, Andrew, I mean, this was a privilege of mine, for sure. I'm a privilege of everybody. You're a titan in this industry, and I've watched you speak at so many events. It was a real pleasure and a real honor to be able to have this very intimate, very kind of down-to-earth chat with you. I'm sure that the community is enjoying it, and David and I are absolutely grateful for your appearance here today. So thank you so much.
Guys, thank you so much, David. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Andrew.
I really appreciate it, and anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, be careful what you say, because we will come for you. We will be. We'll get our hooks in there, and we're going to drag you back at some point.
One day I'd love to kind of, if you want, maybe I could present a little class online or something. For the viewers. That'd be fun.
We would die for something like this. That would be so amazing. Okay,
that's
well, thanks.
Happen.
It has to happen now. You said it on air. We're live, so we're If we don't do it, we're the jerks. So thanks, Andrew. Drop a grenade. Okay, well, thank you so much. I will. We'll see you on the next one. Then I'm going to just wish you both well, and I'll sort of wrap things up on the show here after you disappear in a puff of ninja smoke. Are you ready? Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks. So see
Bye-bye.
you, David. See you, Andrew. Bye.
Oh.
David turned himself off, and I turned it back on because I just can't get enough of him. So thank you for everyone who showed up today. Obviously, that was pretty amazing. Getting a very, very rare chance to speak to a legend in this industry. He's been around for quite a while at Pixar. Has been responsible for working on some of the iconic shots that we grew up on. I mean, at least for me, and like it's just amazing to have that chance to talk to him. So he's very grateful. I mean, we're all very grateful for him to give us the time in his obviously busy schedule to come and spend time with us today. So thanks for coming. We will obviously be having more of these. This is a regular thing now, so don't forget to check the Agora.Community/live page for information on future events, because we do have more coming. If you did ask a question today that didn't get answered, I do apologize. There's obviously only so much time in the day and only so much time in the episode. But yeah, don't be discouraged. We had a little less time than we normally do today. Because Andrew was only really available for that hour, where we usually have these things go on for about an hour and a half, where we have a little bit more time for questions. Okay, so I do believe that we're going to be asking soon on the social channels. We want to start sending out a bit of a survey, because we've done 3 of these now. We are kind of hitting a stride, but there's always obviously room for making improvements to the format. So we want to know. We want to hear from you. We want to know how you're feeling about these conversations. What would you like to see on these conversations? Obviously, there was a really good one today coming in from someone in chat going like, "Where the hell's all the modeling conversations?" Quick note there. We do have aspirations for bringing on more content from things that are outside of animation, but we're slowly building out. We don't want to be in a big hurry here, because we have a lot to learn on just format and how to do animation content well before we start digging our heels into something else. But it is coming, so stay tuned, and we do have something cooking that will probably start scratching that itch for you. So just be on the lookout for that survey, because we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill that out when you do see it, because it will help us help you, help bring better content to you out there, all the loyal watchers of this content. So until next time, thanks again for showing up. We will see you on the next one. And let me just check kind of real time here. I don't have it's not in my brain, so I have to go and check it. I just want to let you know while I'm talking to you right now what the next event is. So, sorry about that. I don't know if you heard my echo. That was my voice play as I was clicking on the live page, because I think I'm sharing my system volume, or I don't know if I was or not. So David Gibson is our next guest for the conversation series. There might be something else coming up before then, potentially, because I do want to start launching the remaining animation bingo streams. So that will probably show up on the schedule soon, which will probably be before David Gibson. But David Gibson is definitely the next guest up for our conversation series, like what you just witnessed here. David Gibson, quick intro on him is he is an animator over at Riot. So he is a very talented individual, and he's actually one of our reviewers or our experts on the Agora.Community website as well. So some of you might already know him just from interacting on that level. So he's a great guy. We're really excited to have a chat with him as well. And yeah, so until then, I will see you on whatever next stream I show up on. Thanks a lot, and have a good day. Stay animated.